Welcome, everybody. This is a special edition of Midday Mentors, and it's coming to you from Canberra and Brisbane, Australia. And I'd like to welcome our friend Brian Phillips from Brisbane. Good evening, Brian.
How are you, Laurie? It's great to be with you.
It is, and I see you already in the classroom. Thank heavens for that background screen.
Yeah, one of the little tricks and tips you've learned along the way. Make the background interesting.
It is. Brian, this afternoon's session on Midday Mentors is a chat to you about some of the things you've seen in change. We've had significant change globally in the learning environment in the last 4 weeks, but there's been some accredited training providers like yourself that have been preparing for this. How long have you been a trainer, Brian?
So we've been a training organisation for 18 years, and I had no intention of being a trainer, but I was accredited to Training Prince 2 since 2002.
Right.
So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, that certainly has been. And your accredited training organisation is Yellowhouse, and that's been for 18 years. Where you train around Australia? Where else do you train?
So our second course ever was in Paris, France. So we ran a course in Adelaide, and then we were in Paris teaching at a university. And overseas, we've done a fair bit in New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, a little bit into Asia. I was in Manila last year. So some interesting times. Most of our training is in Brisbane because it's been a really big commitment from the government here to get engaged in our frameworks.
So you've certainly seen one of the things, the changes that we've seen in that time. It must be, when you think about reflection, and as a summary today, our CEO, Richard Farrow, said there's probably been more change in 4 weeks than the last 2 years. How do you feel about that? That's a fairly...
Yes, we began, and you'd be familiar with those days, when we were working with APMG, and everything was paper-based, and it was so dreadfully paper-based. And when we eventually got to a point with being able to order exams online and then print them ourselves and then return the results online, that was a good change. We've been running online courses as unattended courses for about 5 years as well, not with their own material. We're third-party other materials, and we've been running some APM group courses within that as well. But you're right about the big change. There's been a sense in the last few years that people are prepping for something different, but there hasn't been critical mass or tipping point. So 6 weeks ago, a little over 6 weeks ago, we realised it's stopping. So we either had to stop work altogether or flip to something different. So the virtual training has been very interesting.
It certainly was a great catalyst, and in that also a catalyst, a shocking catalyst in some areas and some companies. But it certainly has made a difference to the people who are viewing online virtual. Now, this is real live. It's not going to be edited. And as I said before, there may be some sounds. We have, in Australia, we have some magnificent cockatoos here, and this is the evening, and they're due to fly over. So, we learn a lot, don't we, on the virtual training.
There are some really interesting things. We've done a few courses now, and in fact, I had 30 people in a workshop last week, which was crazy because I had to break them into 5 different subgroups, and I was like a console operator bouncing around between groups to jump in and check on each one, as you would do in a walk around with breakouts. Yes. But once it's virtual, the virtual breakout is an interesting structure. Yeah. But we've had kids suddenly come into the room and sit on mummy's lap while she's in training, and someone said, "Oh, I've got my pet with me," and pulled out a toy dog. So
fantastic.
And people, one of the things you mustn't do for people watching, you mustn't do this, by the way, as a facilitator. And we learned that early on, where when you're running a class, you might easily just pop in and have a cup of coffee, but the mug becomes huge in the face of people. So little techniques around that. I have found people have been very gracious. The learning community have been aware that this is the way forward at the moment, and we've found a couple of things. We've had to reduce duration of sessions. To be an active listener in a virtual environment is actually harder than in a normal face-to-face environment. And one of the things that becomes very apparent is the energy to pick up non-visual cues. So I like to use a lot of humour. And in a screen where you've got 4 or 9 faces, that's fine. But if you've got 30 faces or no faces, as is often the case when you're speaking, you've got to pull your sessions back to a little bit shorter. No more than 90 minutes, including an activity and then a break. So we're doing our normal 9 to 5. It's become a 9 to 12 and a 1 till 4, and a big break of 15 or 20 minutes in the middle of each of those.
So how long? So is it 40 minutes instruction and then 15 minutes? What's your breakdown?
We're trying to do no more than 15 minutes of content on a topic, and then an activity. Okay. So, and add for Microsoft Teams, I've been using forms and converting workshops to quiz-based breakouts. So a group of 4 or 5 can work on a little breakout activity together. And then as the console operator, you flip over to a web page and you see the responses coming through. So the feedback then is, okay, group 1, I've got yours. And they'll spend 15 minutes on something. So a 45-minute session might be 15 minutes talking, 15 to 20 minutes in a group, and then 10 minutes of a plenary session. But people are patient, which is really nice. Yeah. And then you've got to be able to run your chat along the side so that you can see who's in, who's out, and little messages from people. We've also found we've got to have a tech extra person around, and I use my tech guy is on distance leave at the moment, but he'll log in, and if I've got an issue, then I text him saying, "Hey, Patrick, somebody's got a problem with their internet access or whatever," and he can deal with that offline. Yeah. So it's a couple of really interesting different things.
That's a changing administration role that you've had before. And I think but it's also the experience that you've had in your industry, and it's been an interesting gradual progression up until the last 6 weeks. Then it was a sudden change. But certainly knowing some of those, when I was training, 9 or 10 years ago, the thought, I did one virtual classroom because we had a person do it, and I was exhausted. I had to go and put a beanie on the camera that was there just to, because I had to have that. I missed that reaction from the person. So I think there's some other trainer skills which we'll come on to towards the end of this as well. But you've hit a couple of interesting points here. It is a fact of everyone relaxing. We know that things are going to go wrong. Interested for Australia, for people listening in, Australia is a very large continent, and particularly you've had some recent positive responses from your going to online.
Yes. I'll perhaps 3 little examples. We do a lot of work in Darwin. People out of Australia, that's a long way from anywhere, and the northernmost part of Australia, and it's expensive to get in and out because it's the flights are not so frequent. And we've got a colleague who arranges training for us, and it's part of his business, but he's really struggled to get large enough groups. So with this announcement from our end that we were running virtual training, he came straight back at me and said, "Can I get into that?" So we've got 5 of his people are now dialing into our next course, and it is really good because we'll have 7 or 8 local that we won't see people, and 5 Darwin people, and so you'll be able to run a bit of repartee, and it's a geographic distance, but everyone's only a screenshot away from each other, so that's a challenge. We've also got a remote, a rural and remote, a local government area, but it is a long way from anywhere in Western Australia, that we're doing some praxis training with, and they're really disappointed we can't be there now, so they flipped it and said, "Can you come to us virtually?" Well, we were in the midst of developing that, so
fantastic.
That's happening in a couple of weeks' time as well. We had a group cancel a course on us because they wanted us to be in a rural area, and we said, with the restrictions and the distancing issues, we can't come then. Do you want it as a virtual course? And they said no. Well, they come back to me on last Friday and said, "Yeah, maybe we will, because we're sitting this out. We're all a little bit bored, so let's work from home." I think people are getting used to this kind of thing, little chat online, and whether they're using Teams or one of the other products, Zoom or whatever, just through their regular work, getting more familiar with cameras and mice and microphones and bouncing around. So the environment suddenly opened up. And I've had some people say they actually prefer it.
Yes, I think I've had similar feedback to a person who was a young mum returning for work, and she said, I think the virtual concept is going to really open up that market, because if you could structure your training to drop the kids off maybe 10 till midday and then 1 till 2:30, if we can, even if it means spreading that course out, I feel very confident. And I also feel that because all of our training providers use the same syllabus, if someone on a classroom train, when we resume classroom, was ill for day 2, you could slot that person in for day 2 quite well. I think there's that flexibility that this has opened up for us, because otherwise it was nearly impossible. If someone missed day 2 from illness, you'd have to slot them into another classroom, and it can be quite difficult. Or even worse, you have someone who is sick and infectious in the group, and as a trainer we all know that's one of the last thing you want, is a poor person who wants to finish. That flexibility, I think, is going to come out.
Yes, and and that's both, as a training provider, it's both a bonus, but also it's an extra pressure point, because we've already had people say, "Oh, so you could run evenings?" I said, yes, and we can, and we will, and we've run weekend courses before as well. So it may well be that, for example, I have a trainer in New Zealand, a trainer in Melbourne. They can run courses anywhere for us. So it may even be that we'll do 2 evenings ourselves, and then another person might slot in from Auckland and run evening 3. Which is at a different time slot for them as well. So passing and as you said, it's syllabus driven, where we've got specific activities structured. You can do things that way, and it'll be interesting. The other thing that's happened, of course, is that because we have exams, the exam can be done either inside the course or not, and by taking the exam out of the training experience, it puts a little more pressure on the candidates to self-prepare for the exam. But it also means that you can restructure your time and the way you deliver content. So we're playing around with variables as well. Yeah.
Now, there are a number of platforms that we're using. That's another skill that trainers have to do. APMG, the new APMG learning platform, is using Big Blue Button. But trainers also need to be, it's another skill that they have to be cognizant and using a number of trainers. So that's another skill that I know a few trainers have said. And you'll probably find preferences that trainers have as they get. So I think that's another skill that trainers now, we certainly do a lot of video assessment of our trainers. We video each new trainer, and every 5 years yourself, the trainers, have a video assessment. So I think this is adding another dimension to a trainer's skill as well.
And I think one of the things we found is being conscious of your group is individuals and they're sitting in their own rooms, but how can we make them feel engaged? So we've been experimenting with not a blackboard like I have behind me, but certain whiteboard tools, and there's one in Teams which is reasonable if you get it working right. And there are some others around as well. I had a group doing a breakdown structure, and they said, what can we do? And I said, well, use Word, use PowerPoint. So the groups went off on their own and self-selected a tool set. They presented it back by giving me an attachment in the chat, and another group emailed it to me. So, you've got different ways of capturing and sharing information so that it's more like being at work, but you're still managing the training environment.
Yeah, excellent. And look, one thing that is coming through and is we're just looking at I think the word patience we wrote down there. There is patience. So we know that anything is technology.
Actually, in my home, we moved over to the national broadband network only a little over a month ago. So I was a bit concerned. I actually had faster downloading in the previous system than I've got now. We are reliably informed that the network provider is robust enough to maintain it, but I've had people drop out from time to time. And some of them others, someone actually had to ring me to tell me they dropped out. And so we were managing that on the side, and it then becomes, so what do we do? Now, if someone has to step out of a room, you might say, okay, it's only 5 or 6 minutes, we'll take a break, and then the group resumes. But you're not going to do that because we're streaming like we're television. So the show must go on. So dealing with technical issues is a bit of a skill set, and you don't want to have 2 or 3 minutes of white time when because what most people will do is get a cup of tea, look after the kids or dog or whatever they need to do, or maybe even read ahead.
Yes.
One of the things that we've done, and it's early days, as well as providing soft copy of all of our training materials, where we can, we're shipping the regular training kit that people would have in hard copy. So we're shipping that to people in advance, which means instead of sending 12 units to one place, which is distributed in an office, we're now getting people's home addresses and dispatching by courier a week in advance. So we have noticed where people have had the tools, they've been more relaxed, and those who haven't had have said, well, I can see it as a PDF, but I can't print it because I don't have home printing capability for 120 pages. Yes. So the little things like that, we're trying to begin with the end in mind. What does it look like for the student when they start the class? And it's nice to have a folder next to them so that if we lose some tech time, then at least they can read ahead. So
what would be some of the tips you'd say to people who are thinking about taking an online course? If
the trainer doesn't offer it, then suggest to them, and they should offer it. When we have a startup time, normally we'll do a discussion around the group, but we're starting to talk about so what are the rules? What are our working agreements? And so we've had people say things like play nicely, put things back where you found them, listen carefully. But things like microphones off when the presenter is presenting. Yes. And I know you can force that with some tools, but just a nice agreement. Cameras on when you are speaking, but maybe not have to have the camera on all the time. And people tend to do things like you were saying, my feet were shuffling. Someone will say, I can hear a bird. And they go, yeah, sorry about that. The kids are watching something on TV. So containing the environment, trying to maintain and manage that effectively, being conscious of others. So there's that real sense of sitting next to someone in a class is way different from being 20 or 30 kilometres away from them and not seeing that distance. Patience is I've noticed that people have been kind to each other.
That's really nice. That's great. That's great. That's a really nice thing to see.
Gentleness.
And your starting instructions, that's a great thing when we have, sending the pack out, some people, you can still have electronic, but I think it's a great hint that you've found that people still would like that not ability to have home printing is a real thing. There are other people, if they have, I've noticed some other people say it might be more of a checklist for people to say, tell us what capability you have in your home so we can know that. They're the sort of things that I think we're now asking people. I had another person say, I took this on because I downloaded the ebook on my iPad. So as I was doing this, I had it on my iPad as a reader. Fantastic. But
run 2 devices where you can. I'm doing that as well now. We've got an iPad and a laptop while we're presenting, just to make sure you can keep up with things.
Yeah. Well, look, Brian, that's been a great discussion. Just in conclusion, you've seen a significant change. This and also training in change management. It's been a great lesson for all of us. What would be your take-home message for people who are considering online virtual training?
I think depending on how long this crisis goes, if we're in Australia, if we're another 4 to 6 weeks in having to present virtually, I think it's here to stay. I think it's got a critical mass. So you will find that as training organisations, we're going to have to be multimodal. But if people are receiving training, there's a lot more flexibility there than you think. And we will do more things like, and you can ask for it, is there a video for that? We'll start to video vignette some of the things we do so that we'll play the video of a normal, what is a business case, so that instead of having to say it again, we present it. And that might carry back into our classroom training again. So there's going to be some tools take up that will be blended. We're also looking at very seriously whether this kind of conversation might be the facilitator in a room with 7 or 8 people, but be running it like a video conference, and there's 5 or 6 other people that are participating, so you have a blended mode. Now, some of us are used to that already, but I suspect there'll be much more of that as we move forward. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's here to grow. I think we have to get better at it, but it's very early days.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much, Brian. And for everyone listening to this edition of Midday Mentors, I'd like to thank Brian Brian Phillips from Yellowhouse, and anyone contemplating virtual online training. There are lots of courses being offered. Please look us up, and thanks for giving us those hints and tips, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.